Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. So, guys, we see things are heating up over in the east. China's army can intervene in Hong Kong, so says Beijing. The military can help to maintain social order if requested by territory's government. So, China's defense ministry has said that the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, can legally intervene to help Hong Kong maintain social order if requested to do so by the territory's government. As Asian financial centers enters its third month of protest. This rare warning from China's military comes as Beijing released its first general white paper on defense in 4 years, in which it placed a new emphasis on safeguarding national policy, national political security, and social stability. The demonstrations in Hong Kong started as opposition to an extradition bill that would allow suspects to be sent to the mainland China for trial and have since expanded to target the territory's leader, Chief Executive Carrie Lam, as well as Beijing. And on Sunday, demonstrators vandalized the national emblem of China at the building housing Beijing's representative agency in the territory, known formally as the Liaison Office of the Central People's Government. The actions of some radical protesters that challenge the authority of the central government absolutely cannot be tolerated, Defense Ministry spokesman Wu Qian said in a press conference on Wednesday to mark the release of the white paper. But the white paper did not mention Hong Kong. Mr. Wu was asked how China's defense ministry would handle a rise in calls for Hong Kong independence. He said China's Hong Kong Garrison Law, Section 3, Article 14, had clear provisions stipulating that the Hong Kong government can, when necessary, ask the Central People's Government for assistance in maintaining social order and disaster relief. Mr. Wu added the Defense Ministry has been paying close attention to the situation in Hong Kong, especially since the Liaison Office incident. About 6,000 PLA soldiers are based in Hong Kong at 18 barracks around the city. And so this is raising attention. China says it's ready for war if the U.S. keeps pushing for Taiwanese independence. We see things are going up. I was talking briefly to David Dubine today, Adapt 2030. And he gets, since he lives over in the East, he gets a lot more opportunity to see different photos and stuff of what's going on, and he says that it's underway. Troops are massing, and that this situation is escalating, and we felt it escalating all along. And over here we see China to build a world-class military in new strategy as U.S. stirs up rivalry between the two major powers. The U.S. erodes global security and seeks absolute superiority, but Beijing won't follow the beaten track of big powers in seeking hegemony, instead focusing on having a world-class army, says the new Chinese military document. So things are most definitely changing there. And if we look over to Iran, we see Iran calls U.S. claim of downed drone a big lie, vows to secure the Straits of Hormuz itself. So this can be an escalation going as well. And Newsweek, we see history shows U.S. and allies sending more troops to Iran's backyard may only make things worse as the situation has been escalating. And yet we have Iran hinting at a ship swap with the UK amid de-escalation efforts. And do you guys remember that whole Cuban mystery with the perhaps some sort of high-tech weaponry of some sort that was being used with the diplomats? Well, they did brain scans of the diplomats that complained of concussion-like symptoms after working in Cuba. And the results basically showed that these people, their brains were different now than normal people's, than typical. Extensive imaging tests on the American diplomats showed that the workers had less white matter than a comparison group of healthy people, and other structural differences as well. So while they had expected the cerebellum near the brainstem to be affected, given the workers' reported symptoms, balance problems, sleep, thinking difficulties, headaches, other complaints, they found unique patterns in tissue connecting brain regions. And so Rajini Verma, a University of Pennsylvania brain imaging specialist and the lead author, said the patterns were unlike anything she's seen from brain diseases or injuries. It's pretty strange. It's a true medical mystery. So was this some sort of very, very top secret weapon of some sort being tested on these individuals? What do you guys think of that? And so jumping over here, many of you might be aware that in 1947, Admiral Richard E. Byrd led 4,000 military troops from the U.S., Britain, and Australia in an invasion of Antarctica called Operation High Jump, and at least one follow-up expedition. That's a fact. It's undeniable. But the part of the story that is seldom told, at least in official circles, is that Byrd and his forces encountered heavy resistance to their Antarctic venture from flying saucers and had to call off the invasion, and actually lost ships and lost planes down there. So what happened? Well, the word is that they went down there and they discovered there were still Nazis down there. That's why they went down there. The Nazis had been working with some ETs, and they had basically had technological jumps and were producing flying saucers that could just outdo anything that the U.S. had at that time. And so a lot of people don't believe that this is a real story, but many people believe that it is a real story. And when you think about Nazi Germany, they were way ahead technologically. And the other thing that's fascinating is the fascination Hitler and the other top echelon Nazis had with everything occult and everything basically paranormal, and the delving into the mysteries. They were truly, it was very, very much like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they're out there looking for this artifact and that artifact, and, storing and hoarding whatever they could get. So our history is not what we think it is. A lot has been hidden. And so many people come out and talk about this, all these legends of inner earth beings. And we will be heading to Mount Shasta in a few weeks. And Mount Shasta is loaded with legends of inner earth beings. Some are supposed to be what are called Telosians, which are leftover survivors from Lemuria that have a very advanced civilization down underneath Mount Shasta in the inner earth. And of course here, Cosmic Disclosure, we've heard of Corey Good as well as others talking openly about these inner earth beings and extraterrestrials and how this is not science fiction, this is simply a fact. And most definitely, in my mind, there are both extraterrestrials and interdimensionals. And no, I would not think in a million years that they're all just either demons or angels. Think about, the times that the Bible was written in. Could they, the average person of the day, explain plasma physics? Could they explain plate tectonics? Did they know how an atom was structured? How would they describe that? They couldn't. Because they were just, used to a certain worldview, and their minds were not as open and expanded in their knowledge as what we have today. So things were, just basically described simply in what they and how they could describe them. So, now we know more, and of course in the way past, when we go back before the last big cataclysm, we probably knew more than we know now. The mystery of the ultra-secret Russian Losharik submarine disaster, and many of you remember this. This is from July 3rd this year, where at least 14 Russian naval officers and sailors died on this top-secret Russian deep-water submarine. Well, in some circles, the thought is this is much more mysterious than you think. This is actually a conflict between two different groups going on, and not necessarily the United States and Russia. So when we look at things on a deeper level, we have to say, why do we have so many wars that are always ongoing? constantly ongoing wars all throughout humanity's history. When you talk to average people around the globe and you travel, you get to see that people basically, they just want peace for the most part. The vast majority of people, in my mind's eye and my experience, because I can only speak from my experience, are peace-loving and they don't really want war. However, it always seems like the leaders have something else that they want to pursue, a different agenda. Somehow we always get back into these circles. Well, we were talking about Inner Earth, and where this sub went down is supposedly a portal into Inner Earth. And what was going on, according to some sources, is this was actually a little bit of a conflict between those that live inside the Earth of different factions and those on the surface of different factions. So it's all pretty interesting. The more we get into this and look into this, this is Project Camelot. Many of you may or may not be aware of this. And honestly, I have done tons of research on the ET phenomenon. And, this is one of my biggest things. It's actually way more of a passion than the Earth changes. And it's because I think I have skin in the game in this, so to speak. And so this picture right here is supposedly showing Anunnakis, the tall ones, escorting human prisoners along a beach. And there's a video here for you guys to check it out. But it's really interesting, and it talks about the Anunnaki, and it talks about different ET races that are here. According to many sources, there's over 20 different types of ETs that are actively involved in our world right now. And some have competing agendas, so to speak. Most definitely competing agendas. And some are in control of different countries in this world. And if we think about it that way, then perhaps it starts to make a little bit of sense. So I'm just going to read you a small section from this. This overview is not by any means complete, but we should go a long way towards bringing most people closer to the actual reality we are dealing with. Much of the information below can be found in Project Camelot interviews. The problem with most assessments of the future is they do not seem to incorporate an understanding that Zionists are actually Anunnaki, and as such they have an agenda, which is as an alien race going back to Enki, Enlil, and the whole Sumerian tablets, the work of Sitchin, and others as well, because it's not just Sitchin. Their establishment here on Earth back in probably 12,000 BC or earlier, much earlier perhaps, or of a frequency fence in the brains and DNA of humanity that started to break down finally, but that 90% of humanity was effective, if not more, and involves their genetic engineering of the human genome back then to separate our DNA into what's so-called junk DNA, to slow our growth, to make us more controllable, to take our wings away. And of course, they have also done everything they can to keep our pineal glands shut down, including fluoridation of the water, as well as signals. So the Anunnaki are still here, and they never left, although some came and went. They are walking the halls of the Pentagon, as witness Bob Dean has said, and they are running Israel underground in Dimona. Their presence in Israel was documented by journalist Barry Shemesh, who died about a year ago. A rebellious but mainstream Israeli journalist who heard that housewives in Israel were reporting that their homes were being invaded by very tall male individuals who would enter without knocking, walk around like they owned the place, largely ignoring the housewives' protest and kicking any barking dogs out of the way, with no apparent sensitivity towards animals. And so, this goes into that. And so it also touches on the Anunnaki as a race, are humanoid, very tall, and also are the longheads found all over the world, notably in South America and also some places like the Black Sea area. Brian Forrester has investigated this as well. And they are found in Malta and Egypt, probably the rest of the Middle East as well. The Anunnaki were invaded eons ago by the Draco, and so there is a hybrid race of humanoid Anunnaki mixed with reptilian DNA. called, I believe, the Syrian Anunnaki. Consequently, there's a confusion in this sector over the fact that the Anunnaki can be humanoid or reptilian-human hybrids. And so, not understanding the role of the Anunnaki in our past is crucial to not understanding what Israel is all about. So the Anunnaki, they are a fierce race and highly intellectual. Khazarian Jews have the Anunnaki bloodline, and they're involved in Antarctica as well. And so it gets on into more. There's a lot of stuff in here to read. If you guys are interested, I'll have all the links for you as well. When we look back through with all this in mind, then we start seeing where some parts of the Bible maybe are telling a different story. Deuteronomy 32:8, which is one of my favorites. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, he divided the sons of man. So they made the nations. When they came, they divided up people, and they made them into nations. They separated their boundaries. And he set the boundaries of the people according to the number of the sons of God, or the sons of the gods, or the heavenly host, so to speak. So, this is not about what we perceive to be angels in a Christian tradition. And again, angel just means messenger. This is all about this. It's about the Tower of Babel. When the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building, the Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Well, that actually, sounds like a good thing. Humanity is united and nothing's impossible for them. Perhaps, all their minds were fully active, their DNA was fully active, their pineal glands were working fine. Well, come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. So let us go down, it's plural. And some will say, oh, that's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. When you look at the big picture, it becomes very, very clear. It's just so clear. If you start reading from other traditions and start piecing together, Native American, Australian Aborigine, and indigenous African traditions all over the world, other traditions as well, start looking at the Puranas and the Vedas, it becomes really clear what we're talking about here. So the Lord scattered them from all over the earth, and they stopped building their city. And so, come, let us go down and let's scatter them. We can't have them united. We see all different types of humanoid skulls and skeletons that have been found that are not Homo sapiens sapiens all over every corner of the globe. All these legends of these beings, that ruled over us. The Sumerians believed that the god actually took residence in their temple, and he ruled his city. There were, gods, and this is the same as the beliefs that come out of Greece and Rome, as well as many other places, pretty much all of them. These gods were very, very much humanoid with human emotions, and they were always in competition with each other. Do we not see the countries still in competition with each other? So has anything really, really changed, or have things just simply gone on behind the scenes? When we see all these pictures over here, top left, of giant humans holding, by a rope wrapped around another human's neck with their arms basically tied behind them. All these are obviously slaves with their arms tied behind them. What is this really saying? Is it maybe pretty much saying what it's showing? And that was the reality. As we see all these different legends, it really makes pretty good sense. Then when we see the modern abduction experience, and this is Betty Andreasen, and of course all the genetic experimentation, which we also read about in the Book of Enoch, as well as the Book of the Giants, which was also found, at the Nag Hammadi site in 1948. Genetic experimentation's been ongoing, and then we hear the modern day reporters on this, such as Corey Good and Emery Smith, and just tons of them, Bob Lazar, and it goes on and on and on. It's still all about basically genetic experimentation and competition between different groups. When she asked these guys who they were, these little gray guys said they were the Watchers. And there's many different types of humanoid species that have been described. And there's very, very reputable people that have come out and talked about this. We have Charles Hall His Millennium Hospitality series has gained a foothold in American ufology so quickly it's phenomenal. The tall whites are on the fast track to becoming the most intriguing extraterrestrials ever. And so these tall white beings, which some of them are exactly our size, and then when they get older, according to him, they have another growth spurt, and they live 10 times as long as we do. And then they'll get to be 8 or 9 feet tall, at their peak. But otherwise, they look very humanoid, maybe less hair, much more white, pale white, but very humanoid. And these are basically coming and going at Area 51 every full moon and every new moon. And there's many different species as well. Bob Lazar has talked about this. He is definitely a U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence person, a former. And he's come right out and talked about the vehicles. He's talked about everything going on. It's not just him. There's dozens of whistleblowers that have come out. Paul Hellyer, so this is a former Canadian Prime Minister. He says at least 4 alien species have been visiting Earth for thousands of years. And it goes on and on and on and on with tons of people describing the same beings. And then, I've told you guys I've had my own experiences and saw something like this in December of 2017 in my bedroom. And I saw something like this at my bedside when I was 7 years old. And, my father never spoke much about things, and he was brought up totally Catholic his entire life, went to Catholic school, altar boy, all that. And he never really talked about the paranormal, but he said he knew aliens and UFOs were real. He knew. And they follow bloodlines. And my kids have seen beings like this, ongoing all their lives as well. So this is something that definitely follows bloodlines, which lets you think that, yeah, it is a genetic experiment going on. And of a big, big sort. And perhaps there are competing elements in it that don't care about the other person's experiments, might even want to sabotage it. So, as always, I look forward to your comments. What do you guys think? Have you guys had any experiences? Please do share your experiences. As always, like, share, subscribe, click the bell, get all the notifications. Thank you for your support on Patreon and Ko-Fi. Stay safe out there, my friends, with your eyes to the sky. God bless and namaste.